Ada. Heute das Morgen verstehen.
Liebe Zuhörerinnen und Zuhörer des Ada-Podcasts, wir haben heute eine Sonderfolge für euch. Und darin lernt ihr eine bemerkenswerte Frau kennen. Sie prägte bereits im Jahr 1995 einen Begriff, der heute in der Tech-Szene heiß diskutiert wird. Affective Computing oder auch Emotion AI genannt. Diesen Begriff erwähnte Rosalind Picard schon vor einem Vierteljahrhundert in einem ihrer Paper und heute ist sie nicht nur Forscherin und Professorin am MIT Media Lab in den USA, sondern auch Mitgründerin der KI-Startups Affectiva und Empathica. Miriam hatte die Gelegenheit, Rosalind vor wenigen Tagen im Rahmen unseres Ada Lovelace Festivals zu interviewen. Und dieses Gespräch wollten wir euch nicht vorenthalten. Viel Spaß!
Hi, Rosalind. Thanks for taking the time to be with us tonight. That's really great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. I wish we were all together live.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. And I really hope that this will happen in future and might even be able to shake hands one day again. But let's take the best out of this virtual gathering tonight. So to kick off our festival, we dare to take a broader perspective. We talked about this on a call we had before tonight. And we would like to expand the theme of sustainability to the question, how can we plan and set up the coexistence of humans and machines sustainably? From your body of research, I derive that this will only work out well if we manage to include emotions in developing AI and future computers and machines. Do you agree with that?
I think emotions are essential for sustaining relationships. And we know that from taking what works between people and seeing over and over that what works between two people or a group of people is something that we can learn from when we try to port interactions into machines. So if a person is constantly ignoring your feelings and upset and they're just ignoring it, then you're not going to want to go back and talk with them. You're not going to want to sustain that interaction. So the ability to have emotional intelligence, to recognize emotion, to respond appropriate to it is vital in human relationships.
For our namesake, Ada Lovelace, computer science once meant a combination of math and poetry. Where do you see the biggest challenges in reconciling a very technical approach in computer science with the need to include emotions in designing algorithms? The biggest challenges?
Yeah, I love it. And actually, this kind of a challenge involves a lot of technical sophistication and a lot of willingness to explore, because it turns out that even though psychologists have studied emotions for over 100 years, they can't agree on a definition. They can't agree on an explanation that is logical and consistent enough that we can program. So we engineers actually have to figure out a lot about how emotion works in order to program it in. So it absolutely involves understanding the poetry of human experience and human interaction, not just understanding the math.
So the basic issue is really defining and analyzing what emotions are, and we still have a lot of work to do when I understand you rightly. But maybe I put it a bit more provocatively. Let's say like this: AI is often being developed by people who rather engage and build a connection with computers or machines than with human beings. Isn't that a bit worrisome?
Yes. In fact, in the early days of affective computing, when I was an electrical engineer and computer scientist, I still am, and I'd go to my mostly male colleagues and describe why I thought it would be important for a machine to recognize emotion. And several of them were like, Roz, why is that important? That's just the noise. I mean, who cares about emotion? That's, irrelevant. That's the stuff we don't want to have any attention put on, as if the tone of voice didn't matter or the facial expressions don't matter. And it took me quite a bit of joking. One thing I can't do here on Zoom as well as if we were live is I would show you how they would talk to me when they would say that. They would be standing across from me and they would be looking at my feet, not my face, saying, emotions don't matter. So a lot of my colleagues developing the future technology didn't think emotions mattered. They don't read admitted they didn't even have feelings or understand what emotions were in others. So we're starting with people for whom we might use the word alexithymia. It's a term for people who maybe have a very muted emotional experience. If one person is perceiving emotions changing continuously, another person just doesn't really see them changing at all until snap. The two ends, they go extreme. Extreme, they see it. But most of normal life, they just didn't understand it. And there's still a lot we don't understand. So we're working a lot with people on the autism spectrum and psychologists and others who have different kinds of insights into how emotions actually work. So we can decode, what the different facial movements and gestures and changes in voice and physiology and all of those components do and don't mean, and try to enable machines to do a better job of understanding us.
Well, actually, it does scare me a bit when you tell us that some people look at emotions or interpret emotions as noise. That's really interesting. It's a very technical communication interpretation. And when I get you right, I think understanding emotions in a way that we can cope with them and try to transfer the interpretation of emotion into computers, into machines, that will improve communication. It will also reduce people being disappointed by machines. So in the future, for a sustainable collaboration of human and machine, that will really be groundbreaking, won't it?
It's absolutely the case that it sustains a human interaction. And a lot of things that work in human-human interaction, if you port them over to a computer, they also work. There are a lot of funny stories like that came out of Reeves and Nass's work at Stanford in the media equation, where they would show, for example, if a computer imitated human behavior, like it gave you a presentation and then asked you for your thoughts on it, people would be nicer telling the computer directly to the computer than they would be talking behind the computer's back to another computer. So there are all these sort of funny behaviors that we carry over from human-human interaction into human-computer interaction. So we expect it to see if we're annoyed at it. And if it smiles in response when we're annoyed, we're doubly annoyed. In fact, in Germany, you have this wonderful word, Schadenfreude, right? When, computers are constantly doing things, acting like they're happy and smiling when, we're not happy, we're frustrated, we're disappointed, we're having a stressful time. And if the computer were a little bit more aware and subtle and empathetic, then maybe we could have our emotions and our experiences validated and enable us to take better control of them, regulate them, self-regulate them better, and have a better experience.
As you just mentioned the German word Schadenfreude, it comes to my mind. There are other ones like Angst or Weltschmerz. All these words come from the German language and are used all over the world because in different cultural settings you don't have something similar, apparently. Could we even imagine that a computer will in future come up with an emotion we haven't even thought about or we haven't even felt yet?
Yeah, I don't know if it'd be something we haven't felt yet, but it is the case that we're always challenged to describe what they are, right? They usually involve a feeling component, some other bodily changes. They modulate the words we choose, the way we gesture. If we move in sharp, angular, jerky ways, they're really, poetically smooth and joyful or flowing with loving ways. There's rounded curvature to music and gestures and more sharp, angular ones. And all of these things are modulated by emotion. So it's quite possible that there are combinations of patterns going on within us that don't have a word yet, or they have a word in another culture that we don't know yet, and they could be seen as an emotion.
Oh, that's really fascinating. So before we jump in a bit into the business perspective of affective computing, I would like to remind our fellows, if you have any questions, please post them in the Zoom chat so we can include them in our conversation. Rosalind, from a lot of reporting on emotion detection in human facial expression and other things, one might believe the narrative that the challenge of a computer dealing with human emotions has been solved already. Is that really true?
Not at all. What has been solved is teaching computers to recognize very simplistic prototypical patterns. So the computer is very good at seeing, if we're smiling, It can see if the cheeks go up and the eyes smile too, which some people are told is the way you smile when you're really happy. And we do tend to smile that way when we're really happy. But we also tend to smile that way when we're really frustrated. And the dynamics of it are different and the context is different. So in order to look at the face and try to interpret what somebody's feeling, you need more than the face usually. You usually need the temporal dynamics, a bit about the situation the person's in. Ideally, you know more about the context. What are the ambient sounds and smells, and what are their goals, and what does this environment mean to them? And all of that combined, what you observe and what you reason about the situation is what people use to interpret emotion. But today, pretty much all the computers use is a little computer vision, smiles, and some other information from speech, and very little of the context and the reasoning that people use to disambiguate those expressions.
Yeah. Also, you recently said on the podcast, I had the pleasure to listen to something that also relates to this exaggeration of turning very simple detection patterns into a prognosis that probably doesn't come true yet. You said a computer is not conscious. It can't read between the lines, and it suffers from a complete lack of ability to have awareness of what it is doing. That's not a great description of an emotional context. Do you think that will ever really change?
Ooh, that's a good question. We see in the movies computers that act emotional and act like they're thinking and act like they can do anything a person can do. In fact, often better than we can do. So the science fiction is that they could do anything. In fact, one of my AI colleagues used to say, we'll build the computer so smart that we'll be lucky if they keep us around as a household pet. You know, we could build the AI that means we're not sustainable, that we are just like dogs or, you know, animals that are not valued anymore. And that is not something that we see happening right now, fortunately. It's not the kind of future that I want to build. And most AI researchers and affective computing researchers I know do not want to build that. And the fact is, it's not going to exist unless somebody builds it. So you have to look not just at whether or not that is possible. Like, we don't see how to do it, but we often don't see how to do things, and sometimes they still become possible. But you have to look at how these things work. Like, what kind of business could promote that? What kind of people would want to build that? What do they have to gain? What do we have to lose? And then I love having these conversations with groups like this. What do we, society, want engineers to build? And then let's also make sure that the next generation of people who are building that future are the kind of people that care about people, that care about human sustainability, and that want to build the kind of technology, not that tries to do away with people, but that tries to make human lives better.
So maybe then market researchers are pretty wrong with how they depict the development of the field in terms of how quick that will come. They say that emotion AI will open up a market of around $25 billion soon. You co-founded a company, the company Affectiva. I mentioned it before, and Affectiva offers customers applications in affective computing for market research, human resources, gaming, healthcare, and so on. So it's about commercializing emotions, and that is probably nothing new, but still it accesses a very specific layer of human existence and might entail the danger of manipulation. For example, research shows that amplifying emotions, like putting people in a sadder mood, for example, might motivate them to buy certain products or buy more of them. How can we make sure that affective computing will not become a means to exploit certain human weaknesses?
Thank you for asking. It's a really important topic. First of all, I'll just say that the desire of advertisers and companies to connect with you, to give you a great experience with their product, to make you feel interested and not bored, to make you feel liking and not disliking toward their product, all of that has been around for as long as there have been products and companies and people trying to sell things. In the past, the way they did it was by asking surveys and having you turn a knob while you watched a video, turn it right if you like it, turn it left if you don't. And the problem with all of that is the feedback that we give is very limited. However, if while you're watching that video, you consent to have them watch your face, whether live and in person or with a camera, then they can track exactly which moment did you start to look unhappy or scowl. And then did that negative emotion hang over to when they're showing you the part they really wanted you to pay attention to, so you didn't actually get the message? Or were you smiling and laughing before the punchline, like somebody who's seen it before? There's all these things that the precise timing and measurement of the facial affect can help them understand about the customer. So one of the key things Affectiva does is, with people's fully informed consent, not when you don't want it, when you agree to have it read your face while you're giving feedback, it will help make it easier to record and catalog that information so that can be shared with the market researchers or the educational video makers or the game makers or anybody who's trying to craft that experience and really understand what you might be going through. So that's the big market opportunity there. Now, it is possible if a company weren't trying to be ethical, and Affectiva tries to be very ethical there with all fully informed consent, that these kinds of technologies could be deployed in places without you knowing. And I'm opposed to that. I am very interested in regulations that foster the innovation and foster the good uses, like uses that help kids with autism read faces, uses that help people trying to understand their customers and customers who want to communicate read faces, but that don't read faces in places where people don't give their consent.
So I understand that you make a difference between where and how these technologies are applied. For example, would you make a difference between Europe, the US, and China?
Yes, very much so. I'm thrilled that Europe and GDPR have been proactive in putting forward legislation and regulations that protect people's data and privacy. In my other company I've co-founded, Empatico, where we do medical work, the data is especially sensitive. And even before GDPR existed, we were taking great care to protect people's data. And even being a US company, we were trying to exceed even the European standards before. I think the US needs to do at least as much as Europe is doing. I think we both need to do more. And I wish China would recognize the importance of human value, all humans equally, and not just let the people in power drive what is done. Right now, I think there are horrible abuses coming out where people's rights are suppressed. And it has me deeply disturbed. We're actually working on ways people can take technology and use AI to protect their own affective information and sensitive data.
Yeah, I can relate to that. So I would like to take the first fellow question. We have a question from Isabella Chiazza. Isabella, are you there? Would you like to ask your question to Rosalind?
Yeah, thank you. So my question was just like, what about gut feeling or intuition? Is this something that you think a machine could replicate? Because I feel like it makes me being human, or it makes me being unique as a human.
Yeah. Right now, the gut feelings, the intuitions, and all feelings that we have are not something we know how to give a machine. The machine is not conscious. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't even think like we think. It has no awareness of its experience. The most we can do is give it like another program inside the machine that watches what a different program in the machine is doing and outputs something like says, oh, well, that part of the machine looks stuck. Maybe a good word for that is frustrated, right? It can produce the labels. It can produce some mechanisms. It can produce some behaviors that maybe we see as similar to what we feel, but it has nothing like human feelings or experience. That is still uniquely human, although maybe some animals have aspects of it too. And we all AI researchers and computer scientists I've spoken with, the best we can do there is simulate something that behaves kind of as if, but doesn't have any of our experience.
Thank you, Rosalind, for answering that question. And we have another one by Eileen Tomé. So Eileen wants to know whether there are some solutions for existing global problems in the world, and whether you, Rosalind, are currently working on these solutions for very concrete global problems.
Yeah, actually, there are two big global problems that we're working on right now. And they both have to do with human states that we'd like to help with. One is it's listed as number 2, but it may be number 1 reason for taking away years of potential life in people of all neurological disorders is a condition that happens with epilepsy, where a person stops breathing after a seizure. This epilepsy attacks 1 in 26 people in America. More people die of this condition every year than sudden infant death syndrome and house fires. And yet most people have never heard of it because doctors don't tend to talk about it. And only in the last 5 years have they come up with enough insight into knowing how it works that they see now that it's usually likely to be preventable. And it's called SUDEP, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. So we have been working on understanding the mechanisms. Our data we measure with our wristband that started off just trying to measure stress is now running real-time AI on board to measure seizures, and in particular the most dangerous kind, that after you have it, when it looks like it's just ended and you're fine and you go back to work, in some cases it can progress to apnea and turning off breathing. So we are working hard to get somebody there at the moment that you have this kind of seizure and hopefully prevent a very large number of deaths from that tragedy. That's the first world problem. And I can tell you about the second too, if you want.
Yeah,
the second one's very well known.
Maybe in a short example, also one solution you're working on.
Yeah, the second one that's best known is depression, which unfortunately is skyrocketing with COVID. Please take care of yourself. We are working on ways to combine the affective information we get from the smartphone, from the wearable, and that records bits about your social interaction, your sleep, your stress, your physical activity. And a couple things it doesn't record that are important are spiritual practice. Regular spiritual practice is protective. Things that help you connect to others are so important right now, not just for you, but for your friends and your family, to reach out to each other, meet people at this festival, connect, and forge those human moments of empathy. We are finding that people who do that have much better mental health. And that is really the number one global problem, passing war, passing cancer, passing heart disease by the year 2030 in number of years lived with disability and number of lives lost. So together we can all help the world deal better with that problem.
Can you, Rosalind, imagine humans developing a very deep connection with a computer, like in the film Her, falling in love with a computer?
Yeah, that happens. That's been happening for a long time. I mean, there are people who used to fall in love with their cars and then their computers. When Cynthia Brazil in our lab built Kismet, she was kind of sad to take it off to the museum like a child. Anytime you invest a lot into something, you start to develop a kind of an attachment to it. But I think these days, as technology becomes a little bit more of a tool, that feeling is less. It was when it was novel, like your first car, you maybe fell in love with more than your fifth car. Your first smartphone, maybe more than the nth one. So these objects get our affections, out of novelty in the beginning. But when you look at sustainability, like a long-term relationship, like in the movie Her, I still think that's just in the movies. People are getting a really long-term relationship going with a computer. It's just not that satisfying over time. We can make it look really great for the duration of a movie or short experiences. Making it really great long-term is going to be very limited for a long time.
Well, actually, my feeling towards my smartphone is more one of dependence than of love, which is not very helpful in a relationship. Rosalind, very quick last question, just 3 words, if you may. What are the 3 most important things we have to keep in mind to build up a sustainable human-machine relationship of our future?
Oh my, 3 words? That 6-word challenge earlier was hard.
You got only 3, sorry.
I get 3 words.
Yes, you get 3 words.
For the future. Oh dear. Well, without being prepared for this in advance, there are 3 that pop to mind. And they are faith, and that can be in whatever you think is the most important thing. Hope, as opposed to fear, being positive, and love, because ultimately, love will drive out the fear, the darkness, everything. And that's what we humans uniquely bring for each other and for hopefully the kind of future, for caring for the kind of people that we were creating this future for.
That is a wonderful ending, Rosalind, because the 3, faith, hope, and love, are all very much related to what humans bring to the table in this relationship. So that might give us also some hope for the future. Thank you very much for taking the time and for this wonderful conversation. Thank you, Rosalind.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Das war der ADA-Podcast Heute das Morgen verstehen. Entwickelt wird unser Podcast von der gesamten ADA-Redaktion, einem Teil der Handelsblatt Media Group. Produziert werden unsere Folgen in Düsseldorf von unserem wunderbaren Tonmeister Julian Stephan. Wenn ihr unsere Arbeit unterstützen möchtet, dann könnt ihr das am besten, indem ihr unser ADA-Magazin abonniert und unserem Podcast bei iTunes 5 Sterne gebt. Mehr Informationen gibt's unter join-ada.com. ADA. Heute das Morgen verstehen.